So the Gemara now quotes the Mishnah. The Mishnah is back on Daf Nun Gimel. Notal Sadam. What happens is that after the Kohen Gadol does the shechita, he's makabel the dam. Right, somebody finishes the shechita for him. Then he's makabel the dam, and he gives the dam over to a memoris. Memoris means somebody, a Kohen, is going to mix up the dam, constantly stir it so it doesn't become coagulated, because dam shenikrash is posel is rika. Now the Kohen Gadol has a long way until he's ready for using this dam fazor, because first he has to do the avodas haktores lifnai v'lifnim. After he finishes the ketores, then he comes out and he picks up the mizrach from the memoris. And now he's ready to go back into the Kodesh Kadoshim for a second round to do the hazah. And that hazah is number one on the dam chatos, that's called the par, and number two on the sa'ir. The Mishnah says that when he's ready to do the hazah, he shouldn't do it lamala or lamata, el kematzlif. I mean, this is something we remember perhaps from the, the machzor of Yom Kippur. So my kematzlif, right. What does it mean kematzlif? Achvi Rabbi Yehuda showed with his hands, he demonstrated it, and now we start on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Kimagad Kimenagdana, Menagnana, right? Like we're very familiar in Shas with the word nagde. Nagde means to give someone lashes. And we're talking now about a shliach bezdin who takes his strap or a tzua, and if someone's chayav malchus, he begins to hit him first on the shoulders, and then he goes lower and lower down the back. And the impression I have here is that if he would continue to give him lashes on the same spot over and over again, 39 times, he might kill the guy. So he goes from top to lower and lower. And here too, in the Hazah, by way of comparison, he does one Hazah, which is called Lamala, and then another 7 hazos lamata, and all these 8 hazos are in descending order. Now, if I didn't want to make if I would have wanted to make a major mistake about how to understand this descending order, I would have said that there's a curtain in the Kodesh Kadosh called the kapores, and what he should do is he should do hazos of the dam going from the top of the kaporas down, 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 these 8 different hazos on the kaporas itself. Because the Torah does use the phrase al pnei hakaporas or al hakaporas. But as we're going to soon see, Torah Shemal Peh reinterprets this, and we cannot translate this pasuk literally that al hakaporas means literally that he puts the dam on the kaporas, but rather he puts it keneged hakaporas, and it goes down to the ground. He so to speak sprinkles the dam onto the ground. So therefore, I think what it means by going kimatzlif, which means lamal lamata, it has to do with the way he moves his hand. Right, so let's say, for example, if you move your hand from the top, then you can go down, lower and lower with your hand. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Kishu Mazeh. Now, when we talk about the Hazos, even though the number is 8, it's really 1 plus 7, and the 1 is called the Hazah Lamala, and we're going to talk about a Hazah Lamala of the par and the Sayir. And in Mirza Hashem, I should have prepared this before, but I want to open up a Chumash, and we'll try to see it in the Pesukim. But let's just get a little bit of a flavor of it, and then hopefully we'll be able to see it in the psukim. So the Brisa says, "Kshumaze, eno maza al hakapores." He does not actually attach the blood to the kapores, ella, but rather kineged ovya shel kapores. The blood did not come in contact with the kapores, but rather he sprinkles the dam in a way that it corresponds, right? The direction is the side of the kapores. And the chiddush here of the brisa is that with regard to that first hazah, which is called achas lamala, it's not going to be on the kaporis mamish, but rather keneged at the kaporis. In other words, the dam is not nogea; it doesn't come in contact with the kaporis. Now, the reason why we're emphasizing the hazah rishona is because it's with regard to the hazah rishona that the Torah uses that phrase al hakaporis. So let me get a chumash. Okay, so we're looking in Parshas Achrei Mos, and let's see, Perek Tezayin. Second. So we have Perek Tezayin. Let's see. I think it's pasuk. One second. Perek Tezayin. Oh, see here in pasuk Yudalid, it says v'lakach midam apor v'zabetz va'o al pnei hakaporis. Al pnei hakaporis. And again, we'll see it a second time in pasuk Tezvav. L'dam apor v'he's also al hakaporis. So it's al pnei hakaporis, al hakaporis. Now I'm looking to see if anything is in Rashi here. Oh, so Rashi says in pasuk Yudalid that v'zah betzba'o is hazah achas b'mashma. And then we'll see at the end of this pasuk, lifnei hakapores, yazeh sheva pamim. So he's got the opening hazah, which is called v'hiza betzbo al pnei hakapores. That's number one. And again, we're talking about the damapar. And then we have lifnei hakapores yazeh sheva pamim. And adam betzbo, that's already sheva lamato. So we have achas lamala and sheva lamata. So again, the dam is going to fall on the floor. And now we have to figure out, the Bryce is going to address the question, so what's the difference between the achas lamala and the sheva lamata? Because in neither case does the dam actually reach the kaporis. So the Bryce says, kshumaza lamala, lamala means the achas lamala, mitzaded yodo lamata. So if I understand correctly, what the Bryce is telling us is that he turns his hand like this, and then he throws up the dam towards the top. That's the achas lamala. And again, that dam is going to go all the way on top, up to the height of the kaporos, and then it's going to fall to the ground. So that's the first hazah of dam apar, which is called achas lamala. And now we get to the sheva lamata. Ukshumaze. Now he's ready for Shevel Lamata. Mitzaded Yodo Lamala. So again, instead of going like this with his hand upside down, now he's going like this, which is called Mitzaded Yodo Lamala. And once again, it is Mul Ovi Akaporis. It's not going to be Nogea to the Kapores, but it's Mul Ovi Hakaporis. And that's called Maze Klape Mata. So again, if the, how do you say in English, the Gav Hayat, the outside of the hand, as opposed to, what's the opposite of a palm?
Back of the hand? Just
So,
the back of the hand.
Right, if the back of the hand is upside down, facing downwards,
right.
He's ready for the Hazol Lamala.
Right. Yeah.
And if, on the other hand, the back of his hand is facing towards the ground, then, just 1 second. I think I got messed up. 1 second. Again, if he's doing the Hazola Mata, I'm sorry, the Hazola Mala is then the back of his hand is facing the ground. Fine. Now, when he's ready for Shevel Mata, then it's Mitzaded Yodo Lamala. So if I understand correctly, what he's doing now is the back of his hand is facing the ground.
Right.
Facing the ground. And then he, so to speak, throws up the dam Lamala.
When you say the back of when you say the back of his hand is facing the ground, that means it's like this, not like this.
It depends. On the first hazah, it's like that.
That's
and he throws
the back
it
of
up.
the hand. So that's the back of the hand is facing the ground.
Ground. That's the first hazah.
Right.
Then the other hazahs,
right.
The back
like
of his hand is
yeah,
facing the ground, and he's throwing it up. That's how I understand it. Again, I could be wrong, but
okay, right.
You have the English translation. Maybe he'll clarify. I have just the Masechet right now. I mean, I have the English translation. I just have to dig it up. So this is
no, nothing.
Okay, so the Hazar Rishona is Keneged Ovya Shel Kapores. Bechelka Elyon. Oh, this is important. Where is the dam going? So in the first Hazar, the dam is flying in the air. Again, it's not landing on the Kapores, but it's Keneged the top part of the Kapores. Then, when he gets to the second Hazah, which is the first of the series of 7, which is called Shevel Amata, he now is throwing the dam up to a lower point than the top of the Kapores, and he keeps going down and down and down in these 7 Hazos, and all of them fall on the ground. Now, the Mishnah tells us that the Hazos of the Par and the Sawyer were not placed on the Kaporis itself. The Gemara wants to know, how do we know this? Minayin, how do we know, Minani Mili, that the Hazos of both the Par and the Sawyer that are Nitnu Lamala. Lamala was the first one. So there's a first one for the Dam Hapar. There's a first one for the Dam HaSawyer. Each one follows with 7 Lamata, but we're talking about the 1 Lamala for the Par, the 1 Lamala for the Sawyer. How do we know that these 2, right, the first in each series, right? I mean, say the Lamala in each series, how do we know that it doesn't reach the Kapores Mamish? Because the Pasuk, as we saw, and that was Pasuk Yudalid, and we saw it again in Pasuk Tesvav, says Al Pnei HaKapores, or Al HaKapores. Is Minani Mili. From whence do we derive the conclusion that the hazah achas lamala of the damapar and the damasoyer is not a hazah on the kaporis mamish. How do we know this? After all, the pshuto shel mikra indicates that's on the kaporis. It says al pnei kaporis or ala kaporis. Omar of Achabar Yakum or Zera Makra. So now we want to look at the first part of Pasuk Tesvav. And now we're focused not on the par, but rather on the Sa'ir, which is called the Sa'ir HaChatos. And the Torah says in Pasuk Tesvav, Vehiza oso ala kapores, and then the Torah adds two words, Vilifnei kapores. And now Rabbi Zera is asking the following question. Lo yomar lemata b'soyer. If I understand correctly, what he's asking is, why did the Torah have to add, with regard to the soyer, these two extra words, vilifnei hakaporis? And the language of the Gemara indicates lamata b'soyer, that we're talking about the hiza oso at the end of this pasuk, about the sheva lamata, the hazos lamata. Not that first hazah, but the other seven. And why is it that it's not necessary for the Torah to add these words for Lifnei HaKaporos? The Gomar, because in any event, when it comes to the Soyer, we're going to have to derive the Azos of the Soyer from the Azos of the Par. I'm talking about the Azos Lamata, the seven. And why is that? Let's look at the Chumash again. In Pasuk Yudalid, it says, Yazeh Sheva Pa'amim. Those are the Azos Lamata. But that Pasuk is referring to the Dam Hapar. When we get to the next Pasuk, Tesvav, V'shachet es hasoyer, and at the end of that Pasuk it says, V'hiza oso, it doesn't tell me how many azos he needs lamata. But the answer is we're going to derive it from the lamata of par, which was the end of Pasuk Yudalid. So again, just to review, since the Torah doesn't specify how many hazos we need lamata in the case of soyer, we have no choice but to derive it from the sheva lamata of dam hapar. So we'll call it a hekesh between dam hapar and dam hasoyer. Right? Because with regard to the dam hapar, it says, "V'lakach mi dam hapar etc. v'lifnei hakapor si hazeh sheva pamim ben adam b'etzbo." And in the case of the azos lamata in the soyer, it doesn't tell us how many. It doesn't say sheva pa'amim. Is therefore lama nemar. Why did the Torah have to teach us bichlal that in the case of soyer you need azos lamata? The Torah could have completely omitted that, and will derive it from a hekesh between the dama par and the dama soyer. Because with regard to the dama soyer and Pasuk Tesvav, and this we didn't focus on before, we didn't emphasize, but osas domo kasher osel dama par. So the Torah is telling you that just like you need azov the dama par, which is lamata, you also need azov midam hasoyer lamata. So why did the Torah have to go ahead and say the osa, the hiza osa ala kapores? The entire entity or enterprise of hazah in dam hasoyer should be derived from dam apar, because the Torah says we also Es domo, in the case of Sawyer, kasher also dama par. And in dama par, the Torah says exclusively, he's a betzba'o, yazeh sheva pa'omim min adam betzba'o. Oh, so the reason why, says Rabbi Zera, the Torah had to specify hazos lamata in the case of Sawyer, which logically we could have derived from dama par, is lakushe, to make a hekesh between al hakapores and lifnei hakapores. Meaning in Pasuk Yudalad with regard to dama par, it says al hakapores. Right, that's azah achas lamala. But with regard to the azos lamata, in the case of the dama soyer, it says v'lifnei hakapores. So what does lifnei kaporos tell me? That it doesn't go on the kaporos. There's no contact between the dam and the kaporos. That's lifnei kaporos. And now by virtue of the hekesh, we're going to derive ma lifnei, meaning lifnei kaporos, the lav al, right? The domim don't go al, meaning all the way to contact with the kaporos, because lifnei means that it goes to the oretz, to the ground before the kaporos, is af al. So too, when it says al hakapores, it means the lav al. Don't take it literally that the dam has to go on the kaporos mamish, but rather it should go lifnei kaporos. Now, I have a footnote here. He wants to know, so why did the Torah say ala kaporos when it means lifnei kaporos? What is the Torah trying to trip us up and use an ambiguous language? He says, "V'afagav delohoya ala kaporos mamish lilamdenu titzarch sheyitzaded yodo lemata b'yazek klape malo," to teach us that this first hazah, which is called hazah lamala, he should take his hand, as we said before, with the back of his hand towards the air, and he should do the hazah klape malo. Now, there's something very strange going on here in this sugya. You have lifnei kaporos in the case of the soyer. You have al kaporos in the case of the par, at least the first hazah of the par. And you're telling me that we should interpret al kaporos in light of lifnei kaporos. Why not do it the other way around? Adarabba, says the Gemara. In Yiddish, we say punkt verkehrt, right? Why not say that the hazos lamata should now have to reach the kaporos? Now, there's a whole discussion here, believe it or not, about the word adarabba. Usually, in this kind of a syntax of a structure, the Gemara uses the term my chazis. You know, how do you know it goes from A to teach you B?
Right.
Could go the other way around. But here it says adarabba. So adarabba indicates that there's a logic that would compel us to say the reverse. It's not just my chazis, flip a coin, but it's adarabba. And the super commentary on Yoma is the Siach Yitzchak. He says that misvara mashma yoser lo mashitzarch shiagia ala kaporos mamish. Why? Why would logic dictate intuitively that it should reach the kaporos itself? Ishar hazos so the svara is mashma shiagia hadam ala kaporos mamish kishar hazos shel mizbeach shetzarch shiagia the mizbeach. Beautiful svara, right? We have in zvachim we always do a zrika on the mizbeach, and the dam has to reach the mizbeach. So the Gemara says the following: Adarabba, we should assume that the hazos lamata should reach the kaporos. Why? Lo yomar lemala bepar, right? Why does it say, quote, v'lokach midama par vehiza betzbo al pnei kapores kedma? That's the beginning of pasuk Yud Daled, and that's called lemala bepar. The lo tzorech. We don't need the lemala bepar. Why? The gomar mimala the soyer. Right? We didn't know the number of hazos in the soyer. It says vehizo so, and that implies one hazah in pasuk. One second, I think it's pasuk that's vav. Let me just.
All right, Bruce, can I just do a quick washroom break for 30 seconds? I'll be right back.
Sure. Okay. So now, in the case of Sa'ir, it says the word Vehiza Oso. And Oso in the singular means one Hazah. And that one Hazah is what we call Lamala. And in Pasuk Tesvav, we talk about the Sa'ir, the Namas Sa'ir. So that first Hazah, which is Lamala, which is Hazah Achas, can already teach me that in the par we need one Hazah Lamala. The Lama Nemar. So why did the Torah Bichlal feel compelled to teach me the Hazah of the par Lamala when I could derive it from the Hazah Lamala of the Sa'ir? Because the Torah equated the two. There's a hekesh. Because the Pasuk says, V'yasas damo kasha asal dama par. So the Torah went out of its way to equate Pasuk Yudalid of the par with Pasuk Tesvav of the Sa'ir. And in Pasuk Tesvav in the Sa'ir, we have the Achas Lamala, and that we derive from the Pasuk V'yiza Oso in the singular. So why did the Torah have to teach us at all about the Hazah of par Lamala, which is in Pasuk Yudalid, V'lakach midama par v'yiza betzba'o? And therefore, if this pasuk is completely redundant, meaning the Hazah Lamala of par in pasuk Yudalid is redundant, the Torah could have just easily have omitted it. We would have derived that halacha from Sa'ir through the Hekesh. Then it must be that the reason why the Torah is telling us Hazah Lamala in par is lakushe, to make this equation between Lifnei HaKapores and Al HaKapores. So that if you look at Pasuk Yudalid, it says Lifnei HaKapores. And if you look at the beginning of the Pasuk, it says Al HaKapores. And we'll see it again at the end of Pasuk Tesvav, Al HaKapores. And therefore the Hekesh goes in the following way. Ma al, just like the Hazah Al HaKapores means Al Mamish, and the dam has to reach the Kapores itself. And that's why it says Al Pnei HaKapores is Af Lifnei. So too, when it says in the end of Pasuk Yudalid V'lifnei HaKapores, and we'll see it also at the end of Perek Tesvav, it means Al Mamish. So that since the Achas Lamala of Dam HaPar, where the Torah says Al HaKapores, is the redundancy, therefore it should be the Malamed that should teach us that the word Lifnei means Al. And therefore the Dam should be on the Kapores. It should have direct contact with the Kapores. So now the Gemara is going to reject this question and establish a distinction between the Lamata B'Sa'ir, which we said was redundant because Anyway, we have to learn the 7 azos lamata in Sawyer from the Dama Par, where the Torah explicitly mentions the 7 azos lamata. And now we're going to say that there's a difference between if the lamata bisayir, which is redundant, is coming to be makish, and then we're going to say that the lamala in par, and the other possibility is that lamala in par is redundant. And the answer is we would rather go with lamata bisayir being redundant because we need the lamala bipar as redundant. We've got to keep it redundant because we're going to derive a major conclusion which has repercussions way beyond the confines of this particular avoda, and that we're going to derive from the lamala bipar. Hi, Mai. Why are you asking me this question? Meaning, I'm just simply throwing out your kasha. Why? Because if we're going to put the emphasis on the 7 azos lamata in Sawyer as being iberic, how do you say in English? Superfluous, and therefore it's coming la kushe that the lamala of the Sawyer, also like the lamata of the Sawyer, doesn't require that the dam reach the kapores. Then we're free to derive the conclusion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the halacha of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that lamala dipar now is redundant, and the boile lechetana debay Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the ton of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, since it says the azal lamala in par, and it says vehiza be'etzba'o. Let's go back to the pasuk Yudal. Vehiza be'etzba'o al pnei hakaporas kedma. Kedma means towards the east. Ze binyanav. This is a bonaav. Kol mokom shenemar pnei eno elo kedim. Whenever it says the word pnei, we know that it means towards the east. And we're going to derive that from the word kedma in the case of the par azos par chatos achas lamala, because the Torah specifies that it's got to be kedma, it's got to be towards the east, and whenever it says pnei, now we derive that it's got to be towards the east. And in the footnote here, he quotes a Gemara Menachos Chav Zayin that we derive from this that when it comes to the prohibition of entering into the Kodesh Kodashim, which is derived from the pasuk Al Yavo B'Chol Eisal Kodesh El Pnei HaKapores Lo Yamus, that he's not chayav unless he enters in facing into the Kodesh Kodashim facing the east. And that's derived from the word pnei, that pnei always means towards the east. We have another case of the word pnei with regard to the paraduma. The pasuk says in Parashas Chukas, "Behiza el nochach pnei oel moed," and it means the mizrach of the Pesach. And this is all derived from this drasha of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, which is totally predicated on the assumption that the achas lamala of the par is superfluous. If you're going to tell me that the lamala bepar, where the Torah says ala kaporos, is coming not for the teaching of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov about Kedma and Mizracha, but rather it's coming to teach me that the lamata v'soyer the dam has to reach the kapores because of the pasuk ala kapores, is then lamai awesome. One second. I'm not sure what the words lamai also mean. Just give me a minute. Lamala bepar la kushe lamata desoyer. Is lamai asa. Let me read to you lamai asa here in the Masechet. He says, Ma balam denu. Hare efshal lilom domi par. V'lo yitzarch li kosev klal. Oh. If the lamala bepar is coming to teach you shiagia domam in the case of lamata desoyer, then why do I need this limud? We should be able to derive it from the par. And the Torah didn't have to say it at all, because again, we have this equation. The Torah says explicitly, "V'osas dama kashos dama par." Therefore, we have no choice but to assume, if our goal is that there shouldn't be any superfluous, unnecessary psukim, then we have to assume that the hekesh is from the soyer, where it says al, and lifnei. Just 1 second. What does it say in soyer? It says ala kapores and lifnei kapores, and it's telling me azol lemala are like the azos lemata, and just like the azos lemata, the dam doesn't have to reach the kapores because it says explicitly lifnei, which means on the ground in front of it. So too the azol lemala, it doesn't have to reach the kapores. And the al of par, which we said was redundant, is coming to teach you that pnei always means mizrach, that the hazal lamala, because it says pnei, means towards the mizrach. Okay. We learned in a brisa with regard to the dam hasoyer. It says in the pasuk v'izos so al hakapores lifnei hakapores. At the end of pasuk tesvav, lamadnu kama lamala b'soyer achas. That since it says visa oso, that means one single hazah, and that's the lamala of the soyer. Lamata b'soyer, eni odea, right? Eni odea kama. We don't know how many hazos are required lamata b'soyer. Hareni done, and we're going to derive it, says the brisa, because nemru damim lamata b'par. In par, it says at the end of pasuk Yudalit, it says v'lifnei hakaporos yazeh sheva pa'amim. Nemru damim lamata b'soyer, when it says lifnei hakapores. Ma lamata b'par sheva, just like the Torah explicitly mentions number 7 azos in the case of lamata b'par, af lamata b'soyer sheva. So the brisa asks its own question, a reflexive question. O klach l'derech zu, or can we do it a different way and come to a different conclusion? And let's derive, instead of going back to the dam lamata of the par, let's derive from the soyer atzmo that we only need one azah lamata. Right? Because the pasuk says v'izol so. Nemru domim lamata b'soyer. Nemru domim lamata b'soyer. Mala. I'm sorry. Nemru domim lamala b'soyer. It says v'izol so ala kapores. V'nemru domim lamata b'soyer l'fnei akapores. Mala b'soyer achas. Af lamata b'soyer achas. So this brisa is raising a very revolutionary question. Maybe we only need one hazah lamata, and we're going to equate the hazah of soyer lamala with the hazah of soyer lamata, just like the hazah of soyer lamala only requires one hazah because it says oh so too the lifnei kaporis hazah, which is the damim lamata in the soyer, is only one, and one will suffice. So the brisa answers nira lemi domeh. what's more similar? The azos lemata b'soyer. In other words, there's X. X should be equated to the azos lemata b'soyer. Donim mato mi mato. V'ein donim mato l'lamala. L'chora, we should say that let's stick. Donim mata mi mata. Oh, very good. Now we're going to say that we're going to cross breed from Sawyer to Par to Sawyer, because both are Lamata. And in the case of Par, Lamata, the Torah says explicitly 7 Azos. Let's compare that to the Azos Lamata of the Sawyer. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Adarabah. Donim gufo mi gufo, v'ein donim gufo mi alma. Why should we cross breed from Sawyer to Par when we could derive Sawyer to Sawyer and just say like Sawyer Lamala is one, Hazar suffice, so too Sawyer Lamata is one, is enough. Almid Lomar, that's why the Torah says the Osas Damo Kasher Asol Dama Par. Now, what is this Kasher Asah teaching me? Obviously, we have an equation here between the Dama Sar and the Dama Par. Ein Talmud Lomar Kasher Asah. The Torah didn't have to add those words, kasher asa, because it already, in the case of the Sawyer, it says, Yaza oso ala kapores v'lifnei kapores. So we know that the Dama Sawyer needs hazolam ala and hazolam mata. So why does the Torah have to say kasher asa? Matamalova kasher asa. The answer is to teach us how many azos you need. Sheyu kol asiyosov, all the hazos of a Sawyer shavos should be equal to that of a par. Kishem shalamata b'par sheva, kach lamata b'Sawyer sheva. The Brisa now continues. Lamadu kamo lamata b'par u'b'Sawyer sheva. Now we're up to the lamala. Lamala b'par eni yodea kamo. The Torah says with regard to Lamala Bepar, V'lokach midama par, V'hiza betzba'o, and it doesn't say the word oso, so we don't know that it means one. Hareni dan, Nemru domim Lamala B'Sawyer, it says V'hiza oso ala kapores. With regard to the Sawyer Lamala in Posuk Tesvav, Nemru domim Lamala in Posuk Tesvav, Yudalid, it says, Al pnei kapores kedma, which is the one hazal lamalin par, malamala b'sar achas, because there it says the word oso b'loshen yachid, af lamala b'par achas. So in the hazav lamala in par, we need one. And now the Bryce again challenges itself. Oh, perhaps klach l'derech zu. Maybe you'll take it a different way. Nemru domim lamata b'par. The Torah says explicitly, "Lifnei kaporos yazet sheva pam." We need 7 hazos lamata in the case of par. Nemru domim lamala b'par, and there's a lamala b'par where it says al pnei kaporos kedma. We don't know how many hazos is malamata b'par sheva af lamala b'par sheva, and again that would be instead of crossbreeding, we're deriving lamala and lamata in par. But once again, in the style of the Brisa, niralavi dome. In other words, the azov lamal and par, is it more similar to X or to Y? Donim mala mi mala, the ain donim mala mi mata. Shall we crossbreed and derive lamala in the case of par from lamala in the case of sar, because both are the hazal lamala? And we're not going to derive from lemata. So the Brisa asks itself the following question, objection. Adarabah donim gufa mi gufa, vein donim gufa mi alma. We shouldn't crossbreed and derive par from Sawyer. We should derive par from par. Talmud lomar. Therefore, the pasuk has to add the asa es domo kasher asa lidam hapar. And this was in Pasuk Tes Vav, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. She'ein Talmud Lomar, the Torah didn't have to add the words kasher also, because in the case of Hazol, so the par, whether it's Lamala Lamata, the Torah spells it out. So Ma Talmud Lomar kasher also. What is this kasher also? Hekesh, what is it coming to teach me? Sheyu kol asiyosa of shavos, that the Hazol, so the par and the sor should be exactly equal. Kishem shalamata bepar sheva. And that the Torah says explicitly, Kach lamata b'sor sheva. And now that we have a conclusion that in both the sor and the par, we need Hazol sheva lemata, ukshem shalamala b'sor achas, because the Torah used the word also, is Kach lamala b'par achas. Let's see what we can fit in the next 5 minutes. So the Mishnah says that he would count the azos of Lamala, and he would count each hazah of the Lamata together with the hazah Lamala. So he would count achas when he's only doing one hazah Lamala. And then when he starts the hazos Lamata, he'll say achas v'achas, achas u'shtayim. In other words, in addition to the one that's Lamala, we add one lamata or two lamata or three lamata, etc. We learned to the Brisa. Achas, achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'sholosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chamesh, achas v'shesh, achas v'sheva. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer achas, achas v'achas, and then shtayim v'achas. Meaning, once he gets to the second hazol lamata, he should start counting Azos Lamata, because that's what he's involved in now. So Sholosh v'achas, Arba v'achas, Chamesh v'achas, Sheish v'achas, Sheva v'achas. Below Pligi, the Gemara explains that there's no machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Marki Asrei u'Marki Asrei. Rabbi Meir was reflecting his local custom in the area that he lived in, and there they would count the singular ones first, like they would always count numbers, and they wouldn't count 21, but 1 plus 20. That's called achas v'esrim, shtayim v'esrim, sholosh v'esrim. So therefore, azos, they also count the achas first. But Rabbi Yehuda ki asrei, there the minig was, like we're familiar with today, that you count the higher numbers first. So it's 21, 22, and therefore the minyan azos, we're going to count the higher number, the shtayim, and then the achas. The Gemara says the Kuli Alm, everybody agrees, whether it's Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Mias, that Azor Rishona, the one that's Lamal, Tzricha Minyan, Im Kol Achas V'Achas, my timer. Why is it that every time we do Azor Lamata, we mention the one single Azor Lamala?
Right.
Rabbi Lezer Omar, Shelo Yite Bazos. In this way, by counting it in that way, and he counts the Hazor Rishona between each Hazor of Lamata, then he has a little bit of time to think about the next number. Right? So by adding the word Echas, it gives him a fraction of a second to maintain the counting. But Rabbi Yochanan says this is not a psychological support device, but rather we derive from the pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'lifnei hakapores yazeh," which is pasuk Yudalid by the par. She'ein Talmud Lomer, the Torah didn't have to say the word yazeh, because early in the pasuk it says "V'hiza be'etzbo." So why do you have to add the word yazeh? Uma Talmud Lomar, what does the word yazeh teach me? It should have been enough to say Lufnei Kapor Sheva Pa'amim. We would know by ourselves that it means hazah. Limed al zah rishona. The word yazeh is coming to teach me that that original first hazah lamala tzricha minyan im kol achas v'achas. it should be counted again with each one of the hazos lamat. My beinayu, what's the nafkamina between Rabbi Elazar's psychological svara and Rabbi Yochanan's derivation from a pasuk? Ike beinayu de lo mana velo ta. Let's say he went ahead and he didn't count the first counting and achas with each one of the lamatos. He left it out. So he did shtayim, shalosh, etc. But he didn't make any mistake. He was able to successfully keep up the minyan. According to Rabbi Elazar, it's all kosher. He didn't make any mistake. And the whole purpose of this exercise was to make sure that he wouldn't make a mistake. He didn't make a mistake. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's possible because we derive from the pasuk in the parsha of Yom Kippurim, and whatever we derive from the parsha is ma'akev, it's absolutely critical. And since it says in the parsha, "V'hoisa zos lachem chukas olam," that's at the end of this parsha in Achrimos of Perek Tezayin, and whenever it says chukah, it's ma'akev. Now, the Mishnah says, Yotza v'hinicho al kein hazov shebehecha. And it means that the dam of the par is placed on the zov shebehecha. And the Mishnah then goes on to mention the sheet of the Tanakama, that the dam hasoyer is on the kein hasheni shebehecha. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Shalo hayasham elikol echad bilvad. And the reason is because if there were two, then we'd be choshesh that maybe he'll get mixed up between the dam par and the dam hasoyer when they're sitting there one next to the other. But when there's only one, then there's no chash of hachlafa. And lefisheni yochel aniach es ha'echad ad shenotel es hasheni, because he can't take the one without taking the other. So the Gemara now quotes another din of Rabbi Yehuda that in the Mikdash there was no shofar lekine chova. And the Gemara is now going to analyze its reasoning. And the Gemara initially thinks that again it's a chashash of Jemi Yitzchaliflo hashofar shel kine chova with its shofar of kine nidava. Tanan hasam. Now, the Lashon Tanan usually means a Mishnah, but in this case, it means a Brisa. And this is a Tosefta in the third parak of Shkolim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo hayu shofaros in the Mikdash, which were used for placing the mos for different purposes in the Mikdash, lekine chova. So there were no shofros in the Mikdash for kinei chova. We're trying to figure out why Rabbi Yehuda says that there were no shofros in the Mikdash for kinei chova, and those are the karbanos of ofos that are obligatory. For example, zav. That's in a parsha of Vayikra Tesvav or Zava, also in that same parsha. Yoledes in Bamidbar in Vayikra Yud Beis. Or, for example, a case of someone who goes b'shogeg into Tuma, with Tuma into the Mikdash. And in all these cases, there's going to be a chiyuv of what's called ofos. And the reason for Rabbi Yehuda's hesitation about shofros but kinei chova is mipnei hataroves, and the Gemara explains. My mipnei hataroves, Rav Yosef, mipnei taroves chova binadav. That we're afraid there'll be a mixture between a shofar of chova and a shofar nadav, and the Kohen will take from the mos of the shofar of chova, and he's going to go buy a karbanos nadav, or the opposite. He'll take from the shofar of nadav, and he'll buy karbanos chova. And these two shofars have different dinim. The mechulakos b'dineim. The shofar of chova has even most of chatos and most of an ola. The shofar of Nedava only has most of an ola, no most of a chatos, because a chatos is not bob and Nedava. And therefore, if he's going to be makriv chatos with tmei olos or olos b'tmei chatos, the carbon is possible. Because the maisa krovas of chatos is different than the maisa of ha'ola, olas of, as the Gemara explains in Zvach. So Abaye asks a kasha on Rav Yosef, Amalei Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, in Navid Shrei, we can set up two shofros, one for Chova, one for Nedav, and why don't we write on one of them? And the Gemara asks, hey, the Chova, the hey, the Nedava. Which shofar will you write on it Chova? Which shofar will you write on Nedava in such a way that they won't make a mistake to use the Chova to buy Nedava or the opposite? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yehuda, Lesle Ksiva, on the top of Nun Hey Amid Beis. Rabbi Yehuda holds that we don't rely on Ksiva because sometimes it could happen that they won't pay any attention to that which is written. And Mirz Hashem will continue with Nun Hey Amid Beis in our continuous discussion.